John Miller was not just another patient in the hospital. He was a man who had lived a life full of purpose, bravery, and sacrifice. Now, in his late 60s, he lay in a hospital bed, frail and weak, battling a disease that no amount of courage could conquer: terminal cancer. The once robust and energetic man, known for his sharp instincts and unwavering dedication, now spent most of his days staring out the window, lost in memories of the past. Among those memories, one figure stood out more than anything else: Max, his loyal German shepherd and former canine partner. Max wasn't just a dog to John. He was family. Together, they had faced countless challenges during John's years as a police officer. Whether it was tracking down suspects, searching for missing persons, or sniffing out danger, Max had always been by John's side. Their bond went beyond work. It was built on trust, love, and mutual respect. Even after retirement, John often joked that Max understood him better than anyone else ever could. But life had other plans. When John retired from the force, Max stayed behind because of his exceptional skills as a search and rescue dog. The department couldn't afford to lose such a valuable asset, and John reluctantly agreed. It was a decision that haunted him every day since. As his health declined, thoughts of Max consumed him. He longed to see his furry companion one last time, to feel the warmth of his fur, hear the familiar bark, and look into those intelligent eyes that always seemed to know exactly what he was feeling. The nurses at the hospital noticed how John's mood shifted whenever he spoke about Max. His voice softened, his eyes lit up, and for a brief moment, the pain of his illness seemed to fade. One day, while adjusting his pillows, Sarah, a kind-hearted nurse, asked him why Max meant so much to him. John smiled faintly and began sharing stories of their adventures together. He told her about the time Max saved a child lost in the woods, or when he alerted the team to an explosive device during a high-risk mission. "He's more than a dog," John said quietly. "He's my partner, my friend, my hero." Sarah listened intently, her heart breaking for the man in front of her. She knew how much this reunion would mean to him. But when she mentioned the idea of bringing Max to the hospital, John shook his head sadly. "It's against the rules," he said. "Max is still working. I can't take him away from his duty." Despite his resignation, Sarah couldn't let it go. She saw how much joy even the thought of seeing Max brought to John. It wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about closure. If there was any way to make this happen, she was determined to find it. Little did she know, her simple act of compassion would set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. As Sarah left John's room that evening, she made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't give up until she found a way to reunite John with Max. After all, everyone deserves to have their final wish granted, especially someone like John, who had given so much of himself to others. What happened next would leave the entire hospital and the community stunned. Sarah Thompson wasn't the kind of person to sit back and watch someone suffer if there was even a sliver of hope she could help. After hearing John's heartfelt stories about Max, she couldn't shake the image of the retired officer lying in his hospital bed, yearning for one last chance to see his beloved dog. It gnawed at her conscience. She knew how much this reunion meant to him, but the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Max was still an active police dog, bound by strict rules and responsibilities. Bringing him to the hospital wasn't just difficult, it was practically impossible. But Sarah wasn't easily deterred. The next morning, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Her first step was reaching out to the local police department. Picking up the phone, she dialed the number with a mix of nervousness and determination. When the call connected, she explained John's situation carefully, emphasizing not only his declining health, but also the deep bond he shared with Max. "He's been through so much," Sarah said earnestly. "Seeing Max again might give him peace." On the other end of the line, Officer Ramirez, a surgeon who had worked closely with John during his time on the force, listened intently. He remembered John well, his dedication, his bravery, and the special connection he had with Max. Though sympathetic, Ramirez hesitated. "You don't understand," he explained gently. "Max is still on active duty. We can't pull him away from his responsibilities without proper authorization. There are protocols we have to follow." Sarah understood the constraints but refused to accept defeat. "What if we brought John to Max instead?" she suggested. "If it's too risky to bring the dog here, maybe we can arrange for John to visit the precinct. Even a short meeting could mean the world to him." Her voice carried a quiet urgency, and Ramirez found himself considering the idea. He promised to discuss it with the chief and get back to her. While waiting for a response, Sarah didn't waste any time. She spoke to the hospital staff, explaining John's emotional state and the potential impact of seeing Max. The doctors were hesitant at first, given John's fragile condition, but they eventually agreed that a brief outing might do him more good than harm, if done carefully. They began making preparations to transport him safely, ensuring his oxygen tank and medications would be readily available. Meanwhile, the police department was abuzz with discussions about the request. Some officers were skeptical, arguing that bending the rules for one case set a dangerous precedent. Others, however, saw the humanity in the gesture. John gave decades of his life to this department. One officer argued passionately, "Can't we find a way to honor his wishes?" Ultimately, it was Chief Daniels who made the final decision. A gruff yet fair man, he had always admired John's commitment to the job. After hearing the details of his current condition, he sighed deeply and nodded. "We'll make an exception," he said firmly. "But let's handle this with care. Max isn't just a dog. He's part of our team. This reunion has to be meaningful for both of them." With the green light from the department, everything started falling into place. Officers prepared Max for the meeting, explaining to him in calming tones that this wasn't a work assignment, but a chance to see an old friend. Back at the hospital, Sarah broke the news to John, who could hardly believe what he was hearing. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope lit up his face. As plans moved forward, anticipation filled the air. Everyone involved, from the nurses and doctors to the officers at the precinct, felt a shared sense of purpose. This wasn't just about fulfilling a dying man's wish. It was about celebrating the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, a bond that transcended words and defied logic. What none of them realized, however, was that this reunion would lead to something far greater than anyone had imagined. The day of the reunion finally arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. Everyone involved, from the hospital staff to the officers at the precinct, was determined to make this moment as special as possible. Preparations had been meticulous, ensuring that every detail was accounted for. Max, the German shepherd who had once patrolled the streets alongside John, was groomed and ready. His glossy coat shone under the fluorescent lights of the precinct, and his intelligent eyes seemed to sparkle with a mix of curiosity and excitement. At the hospital, Sarah and the medical team worked tirelessly to prepare John for the trip. They double-checked his oxygen levels, ensured his medications were packed, and fitted him with a portable IV drip in case of emergencies. Despite his frailty, John's spirits were higher than they'd been in months. He sat up straighter in his wheelchair, clutching the blanket draped over his lap with trembling hands. "I can't believe this is really happening," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. Sarah smiled warmly and patted his shoulder. "It's going to be okay, John. You're going to see Max again." As the ambulance pulled into the precinct parking lot, a small crowd of officers gathered outside, their uniforms crisp and their postures respectful. Word of the reunion had spread quickly through the department, and many had come to witness the touching moment. Some brought their own canine partners, knowing how much these dogs meant to their handlers. The sight of so many familiar faces, and the faint sound of barking in the distance, brought tears to John's eyes even before he entered the building. Inside, Max waited patiently in a quiet corner of the precinct, surrounded by a few trusted officers who had helped train him years ago. Though he was now an experienced search and rescue dog, he still carried traces of the playful pup John had raised and trained. As John's wheelchair rolled into the room, time seemed to stand still. For a brief moment, there was complete silence, broken only by the soft creak of the wheels on the floor. Then Max noticed John. His ears perked up, and his tail began wagging furiously. Without hesitation, he bounded forward, his powerful strides eating up the distance between them. Officers stepped aside, giving the pair space to reconnect. When Max reached John, he stopped abruptly, his nose nudging gently against John's hand. Then, as if overcome with emotion, he leaned into John, resting his head on the older man's lap. Tears streamed down John's face as he wrapped his arms around Max, pulling him close. "Oh boy," he whispered hoarsely, his voice trembling. "I missed you so much." Max responded with a series of soft whines, his body trembling slightly as though he too was overwhelmed. Onlookers wiped away tears of their own, moved by the raw emotion of the moment. Even the toughest officers, men and women accustomed to dealing with danger and hardship, found themselves struggling to hold back sobs. Sarah stood nearby, watching the scene unfold with a lump in her throat. She had hoped this reunion would bring John some peace, but she hadn't anticipated just how profound it would be, not just for John, but for everyone present. It was a reminder of the incredible bond between humans and animals, a connection that transcended words and defied explanation. But as heartwarming as the moment was, no one could have predicted what came next. Max suddenly became restless, sniffing intently around John's chest area and pawing gently at his blanket. At first, the officers assumed it was simply excitement, a natural reaction to seeing his old partner after so long. But then Max started barking softly, a behavior reserved for alert situations. One officer frowned, recalling how Max had detected explosives hidden inside a car using similar cues. Something wasn't right. Concern rippled through the room as Chief Daniels stepped forward. "Let's get him checked out," he said firmly. "Better safe than sorry." And just like that, what had started as a simple reunion took an unexpected turn, one that would leave everyone stunned. The emotional reunion between John and Max was everything everyone had hoped for, and more. For a few precious moments, it felt like time stood still. The room was filled with the kind of silence that only comes when something truly extraordinary is unfolding. Officers, nurses, and even strangers who had gathered to witness the moment wiped away tears as they watched John embrace Max with all the love and gratitude he had carried in his heart for years. John's frail hands trembled as he stroked Max's thick fur, his fingers tracing the familiar contours of the dog's muscular back. "I missed you, buddy," he whispered hoarsely, his voice breaking under the weight of emotion. Max responded by resting his chin on John's lap, his tail wagging slowly but steadily, a sign of contentment and recognition. It was clear that Max hadn't forgotten his old partner either. His intelligent eyes seemed to search John's face, almost as if he understood the gravity of the moment. For those standing nearby, it was impossible not to be moved. Even the toughest officers, men and women who dealt with danger and chaos on a daily basis, found themselves struggling to hold back tears. Some leaned against the walls, their arms crossed tightly over their chests, trying to maintain composure. Others openly dabbed at their eyes with tissues or the sleeves of their uniforms. Sarah, the nurse who had worked so hard to make this reunion happen, stood quietly in the corner, her own cheeks glistening with tears. She couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing she had played a part in bringing such joy to someone who deserved it so much. But just as everyone began to relax, thinking the most emotional part of the day was behind them, something unexpected happened. Max suddenly became restless. He shifted his weight from one paw to the other, sniffing intently around John's chest area. At first, no one paid much attention. They assumed it was simply excitement or curiosity. Dogs often acted this way when reuniting with someone they hadn't seen in a long time. But then Max started pawing gently at John's blanket, his movements deliberate and focused. One of the officers frowned, stepping closer to observe. "That's odd," he muttered under his breath. Another officer, who had worked closely with Max during his training, nodded in agreement. "He's acting like he does when he's detecting something," she said cautiously. Then, without warning, Max began barking softly, a low, urgent sound that sent chills down everyone's spines. This wasn't playful barking or the excited yips of a dog happy to see his owner. This was different. Max's behavior was eerily similar to how he acted during high-stakes missions when he detected explosives, drugs, or even hidden dangers. The room fell silent once again. But this time, it wasn't the peaceful quiet of a heartfelt reunion. Instead, it was the tense stillness of uncertainty and concern. Chief Daniels stepped forward, his brow furrowed with worry. "Something's not right," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Let's get him checked out immediately." Without hesitation, 2 officers helped lift John back into his wheelchair, while another contacted the hospital to alert them of the situation. Within minutes, an ambulance was called, and John was carefully loaded inside, Max following close behind, his alert demeanor unwavering. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, the mood shifted dramatically. What had started as a joyful reunion had taken a sudden, alarming turn. No one knew what Max had detected, or if anything was truly wrong. But the dog's instincts were legendary within the department. If Max was trying to tell them something, they needed to listen. By the time they arrived at the emergency room, doctors and nurses were waiting, ready to act. As John was wheeled inside, Max stayed by his side, refusing to leave. His presence was both comforting and unnerving, a reminder of the bond they shared, and the mystery that now surrounded them. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. Max had done far more than reunite with his old partner. He had set off a chain of events that would leave everyone stunned and forever grateful. The atmosphere in the emergency room was tense, a stark contrast to the warmth and emotion of the reunion just moments before. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, their faces serious as they prepared John for a series of tests. Max stayed close by, his alert behavior unchanged. He paced back and forth near John's bed, occasionally stopping to sniff the air or glance at the medical staff with an intensity that seemed almost human. It was as if he knew something was wrong, and he wasn't about to let anyone ignore it. At first, some of the hospital staff were unsure what to make of Max's actions. Dogs weren't typically allowed in the ER, but given the circumstances, no one had the heart to ask him to leave. Besides, his presence seemed to calm John, who was growing increasingly anxious. "What's going on?" John asked weakly, his voice trembling. "Is something wrong with me?" Sarah, the nurse who had championed the reunion, gently reassured him. "We're just being cautious, John. Max seems to be trying to tell us something, so we want to run some tests to make sure everything's okay." Her words were calm, but her mind raced with possibilities. Could Max really sense something, or was this just a coincidence? As the doctors began their examination, they focused on the area where Max had been most persistent, John's chest. At first, they assumed it might be related to his cancer, which had already caused significant damage to his body. But when they reviewed the initial scans, they noticed something unusual: a shadowy mass near John's heart. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but enough to warrant further investigation. Hours passed as John underwent more tests, including an ultrasound and a CT scan. Throughout it all, Max remained nearby, lying quietly beside John's bed. Occasionally, he would lift his head and let out a soft whine, as if urging the doctors to hurry. His unwavering focus left everyone in awe. Even the skeptics among the medical team couldn't deny the eerie accuracy of his instincts. Finally, the results came back, and they confirmed everyone's worst fears. John had a blood clot dangerously close to his heart. It was a ticking time bomb, one that could have gone unnoticed until it was too late. The doctors explained that if the clot had traveled to his lungs or brain, it could have been fatal. Thanks to Max's sharp detection skills, however, they had caught it in time. The news sent shockwaves through the room. Chief Daniels, who had accompanied John to the hospital, shook his head in disbelief. "I always knew Max was special," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But this is beyond anything I've ever seen." The other officers nodded in agreement, their respect for the dog growing even deeper. For John, the revelation was both terrifying and life-changing. He had come to the precinct expecting nothing more than a final goodbye to his beloved companion. Instead, Max had saved his life, just as he had done countless times during their years together on the force. Overwhelmed with gratitude, John reached out to stroke Max's head. "You're still looking out for me, aren't you, boy?" he murmured, his voice choked with tears. Max responded by licking his hand, his tail wagging slowly. Word of Max's heroic act spread quickly throughout the hospital. Nurses whispered about it in the hallways, and even patients in neighboring rooms wanted to catch a glimpse of the remarkable dog. Social media lit up with posts from officers and witnesses, calling Max a true hero. For many, it was a powerful reminder of the extraordinary bond between humans and animals, a bond that transcended language, logic, and even death itself. But while the discovery brought relief, it also underscored the fragility of John's condition. Treating the blood clot wouldn't be easy, especially given his weakened state from cancer. Still, the doctors were optimistic. With immediate intervention, there was hope, not just for survival, but for a better quality of life in the time John had left. As the night wore on, the room settled into a quiet calm. John drifted off to sleep, exhausted but grateful. Max curled up beside him, his eyes never straying far from his old partner. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual chaos, unaware of the miracle that had just unfolded within those hospital walls. And though the road ahead would be challenging, one thing was certain. Max had proven once again that he was more than just a dog. He was a guardian angel in fur. The discovery of the blood clot was a turning point, not just for John's health, but for everyone involved in his story. What had started as a simple wish to see Max one last time had transformed into a life-saving intervention, all thanks to the instincts of a dog who refused to give up on his partner. As the medical team prepared John for surgery, the gravity of the situation became clear. The procedure would be delicate and risky, especially given his already weakened state from cancer. But without it, the clot could dislodge at any moment, leading to a fatal outcome. Max stayed by John's side until the very last minute before the surgery, refusing to leave even when nurses tried gently coaxing him away. "He knows," Sarah whispered to one of the doctors, watching as Max rested his head on the edge of John's bed. "He knows something big is happening." John reached out weakly to stroke Max's fur, his hand trembling. "You've done enough, buddy," he said softly, managing a faint smile despite the fear in his eyes. "Now it's their turn to take care of me." As John was wheeled into the operating room, Max let out a low whine, pacing anxiously near the doors. Chief Daniels knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his back. "He's in good hands now, Max," he murmured. "You did your part. Let the doctors do theirs." Though Max eventually settled down, his watchful gaze never left the hors d'oeuvres. Inside the operating room, the surgeons worked with precision and focus. The blood clot was dangerously close to John's heart, requiring careful navigation to remove it without causing further damage. Hours passed, each minute feeling like an eternity for those waiting outside. Officers from the precinct took turns sitting with Max, keeping him company while they waited for news. Nurses brought water and snacks, creating a makeshift vigil in the hallway. No one wanted to leave, not until they knew John was safe. Finally, after what felt like forever, the surgeon emerged, pulling off his mask with a weary but relieved smile. "The surgery was successful," he announced, and the collective sigh of relief that followed was almost audible. "We were able to remove the clot without complications, while his recovery will take time. This significantly improves his prognosis." Cheers erupted from the group gathered outside. Tears flowed freely as hugs were exchanged, and Max barked once, a single joyful bark that seemed to echo through the halls. For everyone present, it was a moment of pure triumph. Max's actions had not only saved John's life, but had reminded them all of the incredible bond between humans and animals. Over the next few days, John remained in intensive care, closely monitored by the medical team. His recovery was slow but steady, and every small improvement was celebrated. Max visited daily, lying patiently beside John's bed and providing comfort simply by being there. Doctors noted how much his presence seemed to lift John's spirits, helping him stay positive during a difficult time. Animals have a way of healing us in ways we can't explain, one nurse remarked, watching as Max rested his head on John's lap. As word of Max's heroics spread beyond the hospital, the community rallied around the pair. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing Max a four-legged hero. Strangers sent letters and gifts, praising him for his loyalty and intuition. The police department received countless calls from people thanking them for allowing the reunion to happen. Even children wrote heartfelt notes addressed to Max, calling him their new favorite superhero. For John, the experience was humbling. He had spent decades protecting others as a police officer. Yet here he was, being protected by the very partner he had trained years ago. "I always knew Max was special," he told Sarah during one of her visits. "But I never imagined he'd save my life like this. He's more than a dog. He's family." By the time John was stable enough to be moved out of ICU, plans were already underway to honor Max properly. The police department decided to hold a special ceremony to celebrate his retirement, ensuring he could spend his remaining years with John. It was the least they could do for a dog who had given so much to the community, and who had proven, once again, that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Though the journey ahead would still be challenging, one thing was certain: John and Max had faced death together, and emerged stronger than ever. Their bond, forged through years of trust and partnership, had been tested in unimaginable ways. And yet, it had endured, proving that love and loyalty truly know no bounds. The weeks following John's surgery were a testament to resilience and the power of companionship. With Max by his side, John began the long and challenging process of recovery. The doctors had warned that progress would be slow, but John's determination and Max's unwavering support made all the difference. Every day, Max stayed close, his presence a constant source of comfort and encouragement. Whether it was lying at the foot of John's bed or nudging him gently when he seemed discouraged, Max seemed to understand exactly what his old partner needed. As John grew stronger, so did their bond. They spent hours together, reminiscing about their days on the force. John would recount stories of high-speed chases, dangerous missions, and moments of triumph. While Max listened intently, his ears perked up as if reliving those memories alongside him. Sometimes, John would chuckle softly, shaking his head in disbelief. "You always knew what to do, didn't you, boy?" he'd say, scratching behind Max's ears. "Even now, you're still saving my life." Meanwhile, plans for Max's official retirement ceremony gained momentum. The police department wanted to make it a grand event, not just to honor Max's years of service, but to celebrate the extraordinary connection between him and John. Flyers were distributed throughout the community, inviting residents to attend. Local businesses donated food, decorations, and even a custom-made plaque engraved with Max's name and achievements. It was clear that Max wasn't just a hero to John. He was a hero to everyone who heard his story. On the day of the ceremony, the precinct buzzed with excitement. Officers stood proudly in their uniforms, many accompanied by their own canine partners. Families from the neighborhood gathered outside, eager to catch a glimpse of the legendary dog. Children clutched handmade signs reading "Thank you, Max," and "Best dog ever." A local news crew set up cameras, ready to capture the heartwarming event. At the center of it all was John, seated in a wheelchair with Max standing tall beside him, his glossy coat gleaming in the sunlight. When Chief Daniel stepped forward to speak, the crowd fell silent. He began by recounting Max's impressive career, from tracking down suspects to locating missing persons, and highlighted the countless lives he had touched. Then his voice softened as he turned to John. "Max has been more than just a working dog," the chief said, his eyes glistening with emotion. "He's been a partner, a protector, and a friend. And today, we're not only celebrating his retirement, we're honoring the unbreakable bond he shares with John Miller." John listened intently, tears streaming down his face. When it was his turn to speak, he took a deep breath, gripping the sides of his wheelchair for support. His voice trembled as he began, but soon it steadied, filled with gratitude and love. "I don't know where I'd be without Max," he admitted, looking out at the sea of faces before him. "He's been there through every step of my journey, even when I didn't realize I needed him most. To call him a dog doesn't feel right, because he's so much more than that. He's family." The crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly as Max barked once in response. Officers presented Max with his retirement plaque, officially marking the end of his service. But instead of sadness, there was joy in the air, a celebration of a job well done and a future full of rest and happiness. As part of the ceremony, Max received a special vest embroidered with the words "Hero for Life." It was a fitting tribute to a dog who had proven time and again that he was truly irreplaceable. After the formalities ended, the festivities continued. Children lined up to meet Max, petting his soft fur and marveling at his gentle demeanor. Parents snapped photos, capturing the moment forever. For John, seeing Max surrounded by so much love and admiration brought immense pride. "You deserve every bit of this, buddy," he whispered, leaning down to hug him tightly. Max responded with a happy bark, wagging his tail enthusiastically. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the precinct, John and Max sat quietly together, watching the festivities wind down. Though Max was officially retired, his work wasn't over, not in the way that mattered most. He would continue to stand by John's side, offering unconditional love and protection until the very end. Their journey had been filled with challenges, miracles, and unforgettable moments, but one thing remained certain: they were unstoppable together. And as they headed home that evening, side by side, it was clear that their story was far from finished. It was simply entering a new chapter. In the months that followed the ceremony, John and Max settled into a quiet but fulfilling routine. Though John's health remained fragile, his spirits were lifted by the simple joys of spending each day with Max. Their home became a sanctuary of love and laughter, filled with the sounds of Max's playful barks and the soft shuffle of John's slippers as they moved from room to room together. Neighbors often saw them sitting on the porch, John in his chair and Max lying at his feet, watching the world go by. It was a picture of peace, a testament to the bond they shared. Max had officially retired, but he still acted as if he were on duty, always keeping a watchful eye on John. If John paused too long while walking, Max would nudge him gently to keep moving. When John struggled to reach something, Max would bark loudly until someone came to help. And on nights when John couldn't sleep, Max stayed awake beside him, offering silent comfort. "He's more than a dog," Sarah once remarked during one of her visits. "He's your guardian angel." Despite the challenges, John cherished every moment. He spent hours reminiscing about their adventures, flipping through old photo albums filled with pictures of Max in his prime. There were shots of them patrolling the streets, training in obstacle courses, and even posing proudly after successful missions. Each memory brought a smile to John's face, reminding him of how far they'd come and how much they meant to each other. As time went on, John grew weaker, but his heart remained strong. He knew his time was limited, yet he faced it with grace, grateful for the extra months Max had given him. "I've lived a good life," he told Sarah one evening as Max rested his head on John's lap, "and I'm lucky to have him here with me now." His words carried a sense of acceptance, not sadness. He had no regrets, only gratitude for the years they'd shared. Eventually, the inevitable arrived. On a crisp autumn morning, surrounded by loved ones and with Max by his side, John passed away peacefully. The news spread quickly through the community, leaving many heartbroken. But amid the sorrow, there was also celebration for John's life, his legacy, and the extraordinary bond he had shared with Max. Friends, family, and even strangers gathered to pay their respects, sharing stories of how John and Max had touched their lives. Max, however, seemed to understand what had happened. In the days following John's passing, he stayed close to the things that reminded him of his partner. John's favorite chair, his worn-out boots, and the blanket he used to wrap around himself on chilly nights. Occasionally, Max would let out a soft whine, as though calling out for John. But then he would settle down, resting his head on his paws, seemingly content to wait. The police department stepped in to ensure Max was cared for, honoring their promise to look after him in John's absence. They arranged for Max to live with a retired officer who had known both John and Max for years. Though Max adapted well to his new home, he never forgot John. Every so often, he would return to familiar places, the precinct, the park where they used to walk, and sit quietly, as if reliving their shared memories. Max's story continued to inspire people long after John was gone. Schools invited officers to speak about K-9 units, using Max's heroics as an example of the incredible work these dogs do. Statues were erected in parks, honoring brave animals like Max who dedicate their lives to serving others. And in local libraries, children read books about Max's adventures, dreaming of having such loyal companions themselves. Though John was no longer physically present, his legacy lived on through Max and through the countless lives they had touched. Together, they had proven that love transcends boundaries, whether between humans or between humans and animals. Their story was one of courage, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty, a reminder that true heroes come in all forms. Years later, when Max finally joined John across the Rainbow Bridge, it was said that the two were reunited once again, ready to embark on new adventures together. For those who had been fortunate enough to witness their journey, there was comfort in knowing that their bond would last forever. A timeless tale of love, trust, and second chances.